Okay, so all students take calculus. All of them are positive. Sine is positive. Tangent is positive. And the cosine. And their respective reciprocal functions. Okay? So, find the following, leaving answers exact. In other words, you can't use calculator for this, guys. Okay? Which is why you need to know what these values are. Everything can be with respect to a 30, 60, 90, 45. All of this can get within when we're in all different quadrants by coming up with our reference angle. So the idea is to figure out what quadrant you are, figure out what your reference angle is, figure out your sign being positive or negative, okay? And then writing your answer. So I didn't leave myself a lot of room. So just kind of watch what I'm doing. I might come down here to finish the problem. But we all know, I think this was a question on the quiz, what is the sine of 90? Okay. So this one was easy. But this is why you just need to know it. I can't have you thinking about this. It will slow you down so much on your homework. Cosine of 30. What is the cosine of 30? Great. What is? Okay, now we're getting to a number that's greater than 90 degrees. So we have to figure out the reference angle. So we're going to do two things. We're going to draw. The tangent of 50 falls in which quadrant? Where does 150 fall? Okay, so we're going to draw our vector in the second quadrant because we're rotating our vector all the way around from 0 to where approximately 150 is going to fall. Does that make sense? Now, remember we create our triangles. Where do we always draw our triangle to? The horizontal axis or the vertical axis? Horizontal, always to the x-axis. So if this is 150, our reference angle is in here. What is our reference angle? Okay. So all students, is tangent positive or negative in the second quadrant? Because the only thing that's positive is the sine. Are you following this? So we're going to look at that. We're going to consider it to be the tangent of a 30 because it's a reference angle. It's going to have the same value. But we know that the tangent of 150 will be negative. So what's the tangent of 30? See why you need to know this? This is tangent of 30 is square roots of 3 over 3. So what is the tangent of 150? Well, it is negative square roots of 3 over 3. No. All students. The only thing in the second quadrant that's positive is the sine. Every other trig function is negative, has a negative value. Tangent of 30 is square roots of 3 over 3. So the tangent of 150 is negative square roots of 3 over 3.
So it's like the first, okay, so it goes all students take this, A, S, T, C, and that's how you know.
Yes. Okay, when I say sine, I'm meaning positive or negative versus the trig function of sine. Is that better? Okay. All right, so the cosecant. Well, the cosecant is the reciprocal of what function? Sin, that kind of sign, right? So we want to think about this as a sine of 210 just to kind of get our placement. 210 falls in which quadrant? Third. Draw our vector from the third, and we draw our triangle up to the x-axis, right? Only to the x, never, ever, ever to the y. What is our reference angle? Your reference angle has to be, your reference angle has to fall between 0 and 90. You tell me. It's 210 less the 180, which makes it at 30. Our reference angle is 30. If you're all the way over here, in the fourth quadrant, yes. Then you're working with 360, okay? All right, I'm going to come back down here because I'm going to lose some space. All right, so we really want to think about the sine of a 30. Okay. Do we know is all students take calculus? Is the sign, the trig sign, going to be positive sign or a negative sign? All students take. What's the only thing that's positive? Tangent. Therefore, it has to be negative. So we know that this is going to have a negative answer. What's the sign of 30? So the sign of 30 is 1/2. The sign of 210 is negative 1/2. Therefore, the cosecant of 210 is negative 2. Negative 2 over 1, which is negative 2. You following this thought process? You break it down into something that you know between 0 and 90. You recognize if it's a positive answer or a negative answer, and then you put it all back together with the original angle that was given. Okay? It's just the steps. These are just steps that you want to think about. All right, cotangent of 270. Okay, well, we want answers between 0 and 90. 270 is opposite from 90, right? So what is the inverse of cotangent is tangent. What is the tangent of 90? It's undefined. So I want the reciprocal of undefined. So what is the cotangent of 90? 0, right? Because if your 0 is on the bottom, it's undefined. And if you flip it, your 0 is on the top, which is just 0. Okay, so then what do you think that makes the cotangent of 270? Also just 0. Because you're not positive, you're not negative 0, you're just 0. You following this? Okay. The secant of 135, I'm going to come down here. Well, the secant is the reciprocal of what trig function? The cosine. 135 falls in which quadrant? Second. The reference angle is what? Okay, here's a hint. It ends in 5. Yep. Remember, your answers are either 30, 45, 60, or 90, or 180. You know, they might be the axis values, or 30, 60, or 45. So we're looking at the cosine of 45. Is this going to be in the second quadrant? Will the cosine be positive or negative? Negative. All students. So we know that it's negative because the only thing that's positive is the sine. What is the cosine of 45? Okay. What is the cosine of 135? So then what is the secant of 135? You're going to have to rationalize it. You're just going to get square roots of 2. When you rationalize it, you'll just get square roots of 2. Yeah, I have my negative here. Sorry. So rationalizing it, you'll get negative 2 root 2 over 2, right? And then your 2's will drop out. You following me? Okay. Do I need to show you that I rationalized, or are you okay? Okay. All right, tangent of 45. First quadrant, all means everything is positive. What's the tangent of 45? There you go. Sine of 120. Which quadrant is it? Second quadrant. What's your reference angle? 60. What is the sign going to be in the second quadrant? Is it a positive or a negative value? Positive. So we know, what is the sign of 60? I love how you know this so fast, Merritt. Good. So what is the sign of 120? Why would you make it negative now? It's just square roots of 3 over 2, right? It's still going to be positive, right? Yeah, that's all right. Just think before you say. How are we doing? We getting this? Okay. So cosine of 315, what quadrant? Fourth quadrant. What's your reference angle? Ends in a 5. So it ends in a 5. If it ends in a 5, it's got to be 45. So this is the cosine of 45. The cosine of 45 is root 2 over 2. Fourth quadrant, what's cosine going to be? So it's still, so the cosine of 315 is going to stay positive root 2 over 2. All students take calculus. So in the fourth quadrant, you're ending up with calculus, which starts with a C, which tells me that cosine is positive. Does that make sense, Mario? So you're saying all students take calculus determines whether your value is positive or negative. And the cosine of 315 is a fourth quadrant angle. C means cosine positive. So yeah, if you don't have this written down, this map up here, write it down because it really will help you. Okay. Are we good? Okay. Ellie, you want this back up? Okay. All right. Next one. We're gonna skip the warm up. We're doing day 1 and day 2. We're spending these are notes for both discrete and pre-calc because you guys are using the same book, but we're just taking one day because you guys can do this. Okay. All right. Find the values of the 6 trig functions for an angle in standard position if a point has the coordinate negative 15, 20. In other words, standard position means I haven't rotated around a number of times. I'm just working with one rotation. Okay? So, we draw our coordinate axis. Hey, Ellie, you're making me nervous with that. Are you doing the notes? Okay. All right. Find the values of the 6. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot where, if I had to plot this negative 15, 20, what quadrant would I end up in? All right, so somehow I'm going to end up here, right? Now let's draw. What means I'm going over 15, and I'm going to keep that as a negative 15. And then I'm going to get to this point up 20, correct? My goal is to draw a right triangle. And so I come, because remember, this is my vector. This is my rotation. If I'm rotating my angle and my end ends up here at negative 15, 20, my reference angle is with respect to the x-axis, correct? That's how I'm drawing my triangle, right? Y'all with me? Okay. So I want to know what all of the 6 trig functions are. Well, remember, this angle here is the same as this angle here, correct? Because they're reference angle. I can go 100, I can take the sine of 135, or I can take the sine of 45 and know that it's in the second quadrant. Right? Y'all with me? Okay. So I want to know what sine, cosine, so I want to know what the sine of my angle is. I want to know what the cosine of my angle. I want to know what the tangent of that angle. And you need to put that little symbol of theta or A or whatever you want. Okay, from now on, we're pretty much using theta to represent an unknown angle measure. And then we do the inverse, or I'm sorry, the reciprocal. So that would be the cosecant of theta, the secant of theta, and the cotangent of theta. Okay. Well, if I want to find the sine of that right triangle, then I need to know what? Hypotenuse, which I don't have. Would you agree? So we use the Pythagorean theorem to go about finding it. So we're going to say that's 20 squared plus negative 15 squared is going to be 400 plus 225, which is 625, which is 25? Is it 25? And so this value now is 25. Now let's think. This is the slope of our hypotenuse. It's always going to be a positive value. Would you agree? Okay, because we're squaring everything. All right, so then the sine of this angle. Okay, let's do it. All students. Everything is going to be, or what's going to be positive? And it's... So this is the positive one, and this is the positive one. All the rest are going to have what kind of answers? Exactly. And look at what happens. The sine is 20 over 25, which reduces down to 4/5. Agreed? So the cosecant, you can right away figure out what's the cosecant. Okay. The cosine, according to my graph or my picture that I've drawn, my cosine is going to be negative 15 over 25, which is negative 3/5. See how it stays negative? Y'all with me? So then its reciprocal secant is going to be negative 5/3. The tangent is going to be negative 20/15, which reduces to negative what? 4/3. So the cotangent is negative 3/4, and I'm done. Okay? Now, your mistake, guys, is going to be when you're drawing this vector, you got to come from the origin and out. This is not how you draw. Some of you will want to do this. You'll tell me negative 15, positive 20, and then you'll draw it like that. Okay, this is not how you draw your triangle in your quadrants. You've got to take it, plot your point, and take it from the origin out, meet that point, and drop it down to the horizontal axis. All right, so here we go. Suppose there is an angle in standard position whose terminal side is in quadrant 3. So, draw your right triangle. So this is my vector right here. This is my angle that I've rotated, and I'm ending up in quadrant 3. That's what it's telling me, right? And the sine of this angle, so now we're just dealing with my reference angle, which is just that little angle that's in quadrant 3, not the entire rotation. And it's negative 4/5. So that means this angle, when I take the sine, I'm going to get opposite. There's my negative. It has to be negative because I'm going down, aren't I? And 5 being the hypotenuse, well, the hypotenuse is always positive. Okay? So then I need to figure out what my unknown length is. Wouldn't you agree? So we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem again. 4 squared, or this should be negative 4 squared plus b squared equals 5 squared. 16 plus b squared equals 25. So b is going to equal 3. But technically, that's going to be, what's the sine of this length? The x value you're going over, is that positive or negative 3? Yeah, so just put your sign there. Yeah. I always rotate counterclockwise. I'm doing it in standard position, so I'm rotating it and ending up someplace in the third quadrant because that's what it told me up here. So this is my full rotation, but my reference angle is just this part right here.
So, like, if you were to find it out, like you did on these, though, would you go this way?
If I did a negative rotation, yeah. But I'm always assuming I'm doing a positive rotation unless I'm telling you otherwise. Okay. Okay, so then we're going to do the sine of theta, the cosine of theta, the tangent of theta, the cosecant of theta, the secant, and the cotangent. And so the sine is going to be, well, let's think. In our head, we should know which ones are going to be positive. The only one that should be positive is the tangent and the cotangent, and everything else should be negative. So our numbers should validate that. Sine, negative 4/5. So that means this is negative 5/4. Cosine, negative 3/5. Secant, negative 5/3. Tangent, negative 4 over negative 3, which is actually positive 4/3. See how that works? Reciprocal becomes 3/4, and I'm done. Okay? You know what? Well, the next one's harder only because we're dealing with a square root. Okay? So let's look at the next one. We'll skip this one because this one's pretty easy. Okay, so we'll go on to this next one because I tell you, remember to rationalize. All right, you draw where you think your triangle will fall. And draw your triangle, and let's see if you can put some of this information in. See if you can label the two sides of your triangle. And then look up so that I know you're done. Don't worry about finding your other side because I want to make sure you drew your triangle right. Okay. Okay, it says that it's in quadrant 4. So you start at the origin, draw it out. I don't care where you put it, just, so that you have lots of room. Right angle. Okay, I gave you the secant. The secant is the reciprocal of the what? So I really want to think of maybe the cosine as 5 over root 29. Would you agree? Just for placement of where the values go. So here is my angle. Put that at the center so that I know that you know what angle we're looking at. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. That's what you should have. Do y'all do okay? Because our angle is our reference angle, and our reference angle is always with respect to the horizontal axis. Okay? All right, so then using the Pythagorean theorem, I believe you get this to be 4. No, you get it to be square root of 4, which is 2. And is that okay that I wrote 2 there? It's negative 2 because I'm going down below, right? You got to remember that. And I got it. Woohoo. Okay. She's excited. That's all right. So the sine of my angle, the cosine of my angle, the tangent of my angle, the cosecant of my angle. Hold on, I'm going to go down below. I'm going to run out of room. Let's see. So the cosecant of my angle, the secant of my angle, and the cotangent. It's really nice if you just always keep this in the same order. Sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent. Just to kind of always write everything in the same manner. Okay, we were given that the secant, that's square roots of 29 over 5. So that one was given. The sine is going to be what? Okay, let's start out simple. It's negative 2 over root 29, which when we rationalize it is negative 2 root 29 over 29. Yes. And I always look at the unrationalized answer to come up with my reciprocal. Because if I flip my rationalized answer, then I got to rationalize it again. So the sine is negative 2 over root 29, which means the cosecant is negative root 29 over 2. See how that works? Emma? All students take calculus? Yep. That's why this is negative. All right, so the cosine is going to be 5 over root 29, which when we rationalize is 5 root 29 over. And so then the secant, which we already had. The tangent is negative 2/5, and so the cotangent is negative 5/2. We're getting this? Making sense? And then we're done. This is what I wanted to show you. Remember, on the first day I said, you think of the sine as what value? I said, think of the sine as your y value and your cosine as your x. So if I have the cosine of 30 in my head, we know it's square roots of 3 over 2. What's the sine of 30? 1/2. What's the sine and the cosine of a 45? Root 2 over 2, right? 60, 90. Now look, Everything stays the same, guys, because it's with regard to my reference angle. If I do 120, that's the same thing as a 60. Well, a 60 said 1/2 root 3 over 2. But the thing that changes is whether it's positive or negative. So that's why it's so important that you know your 30s, 60s, 90s, and your 45s, because knowing that allows you to find all of your special angles in any quadrant. It makes a circle. We're going to talk about it. It's called the unit circle. And the unit circle, you're going to need to know for calculus, because that's all you work with. And these values right here, pi over 6, okay? 30 degrees is a degree. Radians are pi over 6. Radians deal with a full circle with respect to pi. And what we'll have to think about now, coming up short in a little bit, is not thinking anymore in 30 degrees, but if I tell you that you've got the sine of this value is root 3 over 2, you're going to tell me I'm dealing with pi over 6. No longer can we think about degrees, but we'll think about in radians. Okay? So this is how this is all tying together. This is why I'm having you memorize this until you all get 100. Does that make sense? Cool. All right.